We're talking chicken stock, starring this guy and Matt from Chez, Pascal in the Wurst kitchen. Today we're talking about chicken stock. The best thing to do is to learn how to deal with a whole bird. You get much better value out of purchasing a whole chicken than you would if you were to buy chicken breasts, chicken legs, and by doing that, you don't get the carcass. And if you have no carcass, you have no stock. So we're gonna do a quick little breakdown of a chicken. There'll be other videos that'll have more in depth on how to break down a chicken and utilize its parts to their best uses. But right now, I'm just gonna basically go through the chicken so I can get the bones so we can talk about stocks. In my opinion, stocks are the most important thing to learn about cooking. It's the foundation, the fundamentals of really good cooking. It's what makes the difference between a good soup and a really great soup. Okay? There's always a joke that I had that my mom will call me and be like, I want to make soup, I've got 20 minutes. And it just really doesn't happen that way. You have to invest in your cooking, you have to take time, and it pays off. And I always think that a stock making or soup making or even braising are things that are best done. You get them going in the morning, they fill the house with beautiful aromas, and it's just a nice thing to come home to after all your hard work to have a really good meal made by yourself, okay? So really quick on the chicken, we're just gonna break it down. We're gonna remove the breast meat, the legs, and the wings, okay? So the way I do it first, I take the chicken, I'm gonna split the wings right here, right here. Then I'm going to remove the legs. You can pretty much see that there's a natural line or a seam where it looks like you might want to make an incision. I put it this way, I cut here, I cut here, I break it, remove it here. There's a little piece of meat down here called the oyster. For cooks, it's coveted. Remove that right there, sits right below the joint. And then we're just going to pull the leg off, just like so. Same over here, just like that. Two legs. Then I'm putting pressure down on the breast. It exposes the backbone. Insert the tip of my knife right down to the wishbone, right through the joint on the leg. Same thing here. And then I move it again this way. Using the tip of my knife, I'm just sliding down the carcass, rib cage, then I'm removing the breast. Just like that. Same thing here. Now I'm going to flip it again. I like to use my thumb as sort of a guide to remove the meat as I cut, using the tip of my knife, keeping my knife into the carcass, not into into the breast of the meat so you don't accidentally cut into it. Just like so, and voila. Now we have a carcass. We can use the wing tips or the wings. If we're only doing one bird, sometimes I like to add those in just to give it a little bit of extra body. Another thing we can do is we can remove the drumette. So that could go into stock like this. I mean, another thing you can do if you're going to be doing a lot of chickens, you can save these items, freeze them, and then you have chicken wings. In the leg, we can also remove the thigh bone, like so. And we do this at the restaurant on the half bird, just like that. And again, I'm going through this fairly quickly, but we can get into it in more depth on another video, just like this. So now you have a boneless thigh. I don't take all the drumstick meat off because there tends to be a lot of tendons up here, and I like a little bit of meat in my stock. It definitely helps give it some flavor. You have your boneless thigh. So that's a real quick technique, how to butcher a chicken in order to make stock. Okay, we're back. We're going to make the stock now. Essentially what you need is you need chicken bones to make stock, and you need vegetables. Aromatic vegetables we call mirepoix. It's carrots, celery, onions, and then we like to use some aromatic. I'm using dried aromatics right now, bay leaf, dry thyme, and then black peppercorns. Certainly if you're a gardener and it's in the season and you have fresh herbs, absolutely add them in. But for us, we keep pretty much consistent on the dried herbs, aromatic vegetables, and the carcass. The vegetables are cut in accordance to how long we're going to be cooking. We don't want really small cut vegetables. They tend to break down too much. Super large, largely cut vegetables, you won't quite get the flavors you're looking for. So we're doing about a medium dice. It's going to go in. So essentially, we put our carcass in. We're going to use these just for demonstration purposes. They go in. We're going to add cold water is important. We always start stocks with cold water. We want just enough to cover by about 2 or so, 3 inches maybe. And then we're going to turn our pot on. We turn it to high to get it. So we bring it just to the boil. The impurities are going to start to rise. The grease or the fat is going to start rendering, and we're going to be able to do some skimming. It's very important to have good fundamentals with stocks, skimming them, cleaning them, and that's something that we're going to do. Once this thing comes to a boil, I'm going to show you how we skim it and how we can maintain the rim of the pan or the pot. Once this comes to a boil, we're going to lower it, it's going to simmer, and I'm going to skim it. That our chicken stock is about to boil, this is the time that we want to really pay attention and skim, removing the impurities, any of the fat that has come to the surface. We want to maintain the edge of the pan with a little pastry brush with water. You can kind of wipe it down to keep the edge of the pan clean, and then we're going to add our mirepoix. So now it's just come up to the boil. You want to turn it to a simmer. For skimming, I like to use a ladle, and what I do is I push the ladle down below the surface of the liquid or the stock, and then the impurities will just kind of fall right into my ladle, and I remove them. So just like so, and then we put them into here. We just discard them. So again, I'm using just the top surface, and everything falls into my ladle. They make all sorts of different little gadgets for doing this, but again, I just find that for me, this is the most practical, and I think it really works. So again, I'm just going around, removing the impurities, the grease. This is very important in maintaining your stocks. Just like that. And now is when I would add the mirepoix. Okay? The reason why I don't add the mirepoix in the beginning, I mean, you could, absolutely, but it really makes it hard to clean the surface of the stock if you have your vegetables floating around in there. So again, I believe, put the water in, bring it to the boil, allow the proteins and impurities to coagulate. They rise to the surface. The fat is there. You're using your ladle. You're coming right around and just skimming this on. There's a fancy word called depouillage, where you remove or you move the pan and you put the flame on one side, concentrate the flame on one side of the pan, and what that does is that forces all the grease or the fats and the impurities to the other to make it easier to skim. It's a very important technique when we get into making consommes, which is one of my all-time favorite things to make. So now the stock is simmering. Now you add your mirepoix, your onions, our carrots and celery, and typically the ratio is 2 parts onion to 1 part carrot and celery. Now again, if it's winter time and you see celery root, you certainly can use celery root or celeriac in replace of celery. And then we're using our dried bay leaf, dried thyme, and black peppercorns. Again, maintaining throughout the time, just wiping the edge of the pan. You'll see this in that veal stock or beef, pork, any of those stocks that are going for a long period of time where there's considerable reduction. You want to keep the edges of the pan nice and clean, okay? It's all about maintenance. And it makes it much easier to clean it at the end, your saucepans. So this is going to simmer for about 1.5 hours, and then we'll strain it. Once it's strained, you want to cool your stock. Then you can freeze it. You can use it right away. It's just a great thing to have on hand. Now that our stock has been simmering for about 1.5 hours, it's time to strain. We at the restaurant use a chinois, which is a fine mesh strainer, used for also passing our sauces at their final destination point. Okay, so chinois into a large bain-marie. Then we can either break it down into something smaller to chill it, to freeze it, or use it right away. So I'm going to turn it off. and we're going to strain it. If you don't have a chinois, perhaps a fine mesh basket strainer is fine, or even a small colander. The only problem with a colander, if the holes are too big, some of the particles might fall through. Okay, so we're just going to strain our stock. All the bones, the remains in this pot, we go into our compost bin. Just like that. Right in there. Let it all strain through. Sometimes just knock this a little bit. Really want to get everything out of there. We just spent a lot of time investing in our stock. We want to make sure we get all of it out. There we go. And then I'll just pour it in here just so you can see. Okay, that's generally the color. It's a nice golden straw-like or hay-colored stock. It'll settle out a little bit. Some more fat will settle to the top. When you refrigerate it, it should solidify. You can easily remove it. Again, not the end of the world if there's a little bit of grease or fat on the top of the stock. But what you don't want is it to boil where it would emulsify it, and it'll make sort of a murky level as it cools. You would see that. So our finished chicken stock, and thank you for joining us on this episode.